Good morning. I'm Matt Smith, president of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, and we're very excited to welcome you to another in our series of First Friday events this year. And we're extremely pleased for the March 1st Friday.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to jump in here. I think Matt's power might have gone out. We seem to have that issue with with Matt's power sometimes. We'll get that taken care of, but I will jump in and just welcome us this morning. We are very happy and pleased to have Governor Wolf join us for our first Friday this March. We're very thankful the Governor has been working with us on so many issues that impact Southwestern Pennsylvania's economy and quality of life. So before we get started, I am going to first welcome and thank our sponsor, BNY Mellon. Andrea Stanford is here and she's going to give a few opening remarks as well. So I will turn it over to Andrea right now.
Good morning and thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen, and to Matt when Matt rejoins. My name is Andrea Stanford. I'm the Pittsburgh Regional Manager for Bank of New York Mellon. Thrilled to be here, and BNY Mellon is such a proud sponsor. I'm proud to sponsor the First Friday series, which really brings together our region's private and public sector leadership to discuss key issues impacting both our city and our region. And we're equally excited and thrilled to have Governor Wolf joining us today to talk about his final budget. And while we're here to talk about the Commonwealth, I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the global situation happening in Ukraine. As a global organization that provides financial services for institutions, corporations, and individual investors, this has been top of mind for us these past few days, and I'm sure it's been top of mind for many of you as well. It's also why our signage, like many others across the Pittsburgh downtown skyline, has been illuminated in blue and yellow this week. And it's why we've equipped our employees with resources to support organizations on the ground providing humanitarian aid and assistance. As a global organization, that's what we've always done. While we operate globally, at BNY Mellon, we act locally. And that's been our track record here in the Greater Pittsburgh region for over 150 years. We've done this by being a good corporate citizen and neighbor through our foundation giving, extensive employee volunteerism efforts, and investments in projects that make an impact in our local community. It's investments like our Fund the Future of our Future Workforce, which is a multi-year commitment in support of vital education and workforce development programming to academic and job training organizations. It's also why we've supported advancing legislation like Keystone Saves, which has the potential to empower all Pennsylvanians to save and prepare for retirement. And as we talk about readying our future workforce, many of our colleagues here in downtown Pittsburgh are doing just that, as we prepare to bring back thousands of our employees back to the downtown region in preparation for our return to office efforts that kick off next week. We're thankful to the Chamber for being convener of regional employers to support, to provide support and advance topics that are top of mind for our region. Governor Wolf, we look forward to working with you in your final term and are looking forward to the conversation ahead today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and apologies for the technical difficulties on my end. And thank you again to BNY Mellon for your tremendous support of our First Friday speaker series. And I also wanted to note what I was going to say as part of the opening is we're extremely pleased today to have so many leaders with us in the audience from Washington County, from Lawrence County, from Westmoreland County, from Indiana County, to name just a few. And we know that when we go to Harrisburg and we go to Washington, D.C., and as one region with one voice, we are all the more stronger as a region. And so that partnership with our entire regional partner network is really critical. So I did want to note that and thank all of you for attending today. As Andrea noted, we're very happy to welcome Governor Tom Wolf. Here's our March 1st Friday speaker. Governor Wolf was sworn in on January 20th, 2015 as Pennsylvania's 47th governor. We've worked with Governor Wolf on issues such as pension reform, expansion of the neighborhood assistance program, tax credit, and our top policy priority right now, reducing Pennsylvania's corporate net income tax rate. In addition to that vital work on making Pennsylvania's business tax structure more competitive, in his final budget, we look forward to working with the governor and his team on autonomous vehicle regulatory changes, strategic and robust economic development investment in our region, particularly in sectors such as robotics and autonomous mobile systems, energy, and life sciences, and partnering to ensure the vitality of downtown Pittsburgh. And we look forward to working with the state and with Governor Wolf on all of those issues. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to our honored guest today, Governor Tom Wolf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
I think people who are term limited might be forgiven for actually coasting in their last year, but I think you want to run through the finish line. This job has changed me. I'm 7 years older now than I was when I started this job. I have 3 grandchildren I didn't have before. Francis and I are in our 47th year of marriage, and I am more of a advocate for democracy now than I even was, and I was a big fan before I got here. It's the give and take, the frictions, the annoying disagreements that are so much a part of democracy. That's what makes us stronger. Each budget address has, I think, sort of reflected the tenor of where we were financially. We were in rotten financial shape in my first couple of years. So I put out a budget that said, let's fix this. All things are possible. And it was a little more ambitious than apparently the General Assembly wouldn't go along with. Then we started working together, a pension system. Then we worked together on liquor. We worked together on legalizing medical marijuana. And by the time we got to the second budget, we could actually start moving toward compromise. I do a lousy job in terms of touting the things that have been done, but you know, thinking about it, we really have done a lot. We've done criminal justice reform, expansion of Medicaid. I mean, we have the lowest uninsured rate in Pennsylvania history, $1.9 billion into public education, 11,000 fewer prisoners in our prisons. Pennsylvania was the first state to have a GI Bill. We have the first farm bill, joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And we have almost $3 billion in the rainy day fund. I'm proud to be the first governor in 4 decades to hand over a budget surplus to my successor. Because of the surplus, we can actually do something we have never been able to do in my 7 years, and that is to say, you know what? We can pay our bills and we don't have to raise anybody's taxes. In fact, we can reduce the corporate income tax. The question, I guess, is what do we do with this surplus? And the last thing you want to do is fritter it away. I think of that family down the street or down the road, and they're trying to make ends meet, and they're trying to pay the car bill, they're trying to pay their insurance bill, they're trying to pay the mortgage or the rent, and then, you know, one of their children ends up needing braces, and they got to pay for that. I'm trying to think of that family. What is it that we can do at the state level? The first thing is education. That's transformational. I'm not sure there's anything that's more important for a state than education. When we stiff education, we're basically just saying, well, we're gonna, you know, we're stiffing ourselves. We're cheating ourselves out of our future. The other two things, the minimum wage and the corporate and income tax, are basically saying, if we do a good job in preparing you for a career in this complicated and ever-changing world that we live in, then we need you to have opportunities. I'd like to make this a place that people want to come and learn and then stay. I'm not really loading this budget up with a whole lot of ancillary things. They're just a few things. And it's basically, come on, we've done so many different good things together. Here are a few things that remain to be done. Let's get them done. Bring them across the finish line. Let's finish the job. And by the way, in the process, let's show the world that democracy actually works. So thank you very much for that, the introduction and for the showing the video, Matt and everybody. I really appreciate that. And it's good to be here. And I want to just echo Andrea's comments. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, all of us, I know, stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the sisters and brothers in Ukraine who are fighting for their independence and for democracy. This is really important. And as you know, we've taken steps here in Pennsylvania to the extent we can. We do about $60 million a year in trade with Ukraine. They are a real partner for Pennsylvania. So we've taken any Russian products off the shelves of the Liquor Control Board, the state stores, the state retirement systems have already decided, and I think the other one decide today, not to make sure they're not investing in any securities that have anything to do with Russia. And so we're continuing to look for ways that we can concretely aid the Ukraine. But like Andrea, we all want to show our solidarity with the heroic actions that they're taking now to defend their freedom and their democratic system. So having said that, again, it's great to be here with you, and I appreciate your giving me the chance to talk about the budget and have a conversation about how we can continue to do good things to move Pennsylvania forward. The truth is, as you saw in the video, from a fiscal point of view, Pennsylvania is actually in pretty good shape right now. And this gives us the ability to really do things that we haven't been able to. I was talking to Matt earlier. When he was in the state house and then the state senate, things were different, and we weren't able to even pay our bills. We can do that now, and we need to make sure that we invest and not only pay the bills but make investments that actually push Pennsylvania forward. And I'm really proud of what we've done over the past 7 years. When I took office, I inherited a structural budget deficit of $2 to $3 billion, according to the Independent Fiscal Office. Our rainy day fund was $231,800. If you do the math, that's worth about 20 minutes running the state. Now that's really pathetic, but it actually wasn't the worst. The worst state, I think, was Illinois at that point. They had 11 minutes worth of money in their rainy day fund. So we were bad, and we were one of the least creditworthy states in the country. As I said, we couldn't even pay our pension bill. Today we are paying our pension bill, and as Matt said, we work together with you and a lot of folks to make sure that we are paying our bill. And part of that was that we reformed our pension. It was one of the interesting gatherings in the rotunda in the Capitol where we had organized labor, Republican legislators and Democratic legislators all together to sign the legislation that made our pension system what it is today. Our rainy day fund, remember, it had 231,000, it now has $2.8 billion in it. And that huge deficit, last year we had a big surplus. This year, again, we're gonna have an even bigger surplus. But the successes haven't only been fiscal in nature, and we didn't get here by just hunkering down and with an austerity budget. We've actually been investing in things. We invested nearly $2 billion, or 1.9 billion, I guess, in education. We've expanded access to healthcare through the Affordable Care Act, expanding Medicaid and the launch of Penny, our own state-based exchange. We've eliminated the capital stock and franchise tax. In fact, that was done, I think, back in one of the first things I did. We've cut our prison population by 11,000. We've implemented the most significant improvements to our election system in more than 80 years. We've reduced our carbon footprint. We've spent a record amount of state contracting dollars on small and diverse businesses. And there's a whole lot more. And I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish over the last 7 years. But I know there's still a lot we have to do. And as I said in that video, I don't want to coast in this last year. I think we still have a few things to do, and I want to get them done. The steady improvement in Pennsylvania's finances over the past 7 years gives us the chance to actually do that, to pay our bills and actually make good on some investments that we really ought to make. Again, this year, we're looking at a almost $6.5 billion surplus when we get to June. That's not going to be our first surplus. We've had surpluses before, but this is going to be by far our biggest. I think last year's surplus was 2.6 to somewhere between 2.5, $3 billion. And it's clear some of that surplus, this $6.5 billion surplus, is coming because we have one-time help from the federal government in terms of expanded help for Medicaid and other social services. And that's going to go away. But the big news here is that about half of this surplus is coming from recurring increases in revenue. I mean, the economy's doing well, and so is Pennsylvania. So I track our revenues on a daily basis by category, and we're up all across the board. Sales tax receipts are up, corporate taxes are up, personal income taxes are up, whether it's withholding taxes, quarterly estimated taxes, annual payments, they're all up. In fact, the only tax I think that has been sort of flat has been the cigarette tax. And that's not a big contributor to the state budget. So things are going well all across the board, and this has been happening now for a number of years. We've had increases in revenues that predated all the good things that have come from Washington over the past 2 years as a result of support for Commonwealth, the states all across the country with the COVID pandemic. But we have shown healthy growth in this recurring area, and that again continues right now. As of the end of February, February is not a big month for revenues, but we had $155 million surplus over estimates of revenues over estimate in February alone. That took us, the year to date is just a little over $2 billion surplus in estimated overestimate revenues. And that's before we get to our big months, which are March, April, and May. So things are really looking very good right now. And this is what allows the Commonwealth to make the investments we need to make and pay the bills we need to pay. First thing we ought to do is make sure we address the burden on Pennsylvania taxpayers. And I want to start with the corporate net income tax. As you know, the CNIT is the highest in the nation, and it really is holding our Commonwealth back. It's a big barrier to business who want to come to Pennsylvania. It's a big barrier to businesses who are already in Pennsylvania and want to expand and want to continue to drive our economy forward. As I said in that video, we need to make Pennsylvania a place that attracts and keeps entrepreneurs, people who are interested in creating family-sustaining jobs. They're going to drive our economy forward. So my plan in the budget, as I outlined, it calls for an immediate reduction of the corporate income tax from 9.99%, which is where it is right now, to 7.99% immediately. But I want to then, and I know this is my last year, so I can't dictate this, but say let's move forward to the point where we get it down to 4.99% as quickly as possible. My plan also calls for major investments in education. I think businesses need to have tax relief, but they also need to have a steady source of good, skilled employees. And we have an education system that really has some of the finest schools and universities in the entire world. We also have some schools that are hurting because we don't fund them adequately. So we need to do a better job there. So I want to continue to invest in education. I want to invest in workforce development. I want to invest in public safety. I want to protect the vulnerable members of our community. So again, I'm proposing $1.55 billion increase in education funding. I want to raise the minimum wage so workers all across Pennsylvania can support themselves. And the minimum wage to me is a lot like what the CNIT is. To a certain extent, there's a sticker shock that people get when they look at Pennsylvania and see a 9.99% corporate net income tax. They say, I don't care what I can do to avoid paying that. I don't want to come to a state that has a tax that high. They obviously don't care about business. And the same thing is true of a minimum wage that's at $7.25. Workers look at that from states all around us. Even West Virginia is higher than Pennsylvania in terms of the minimum wage. And they look at us and say, evidently you don't want people to come and work there. Well, we do. We want businesses to come here, and we want good workers to come here and stay here and live here and raise families, build their careers here. And we need to make sure that we're saying that in everything we do, including the minimum wage. So my plan is bold in terms of what I'd like to do, but it's fiscally responsible. I am not, let me repeat, not relying on one-time revenues. In fact, my budget actually has, I think, a fairly innovative way of taking account of the fact that no one expects next year's revenues or next year's budget to be anywhere close to where it is this year. So I'm proposing that we hold over $3 billion in surplus this year, and hold that over to be the opening balance for next year's budget. And next year's budget will have a surplus, figuring to hold that over as the opening balance, about 1.3 billion of that as the opening balance for the 2 years out budget. So I'm not relying on one-time funding sources, and I'm trying to be as conservative as I can, looking forward to future years, so that future governors and future general assemblies have the wherewithal to actually continue to make the investments that I'm making here. And by the way, none of what I'm talking about here even touches the $2.87 billion that's in the rainy day fund. I propose that we don't even touch that. We keep that. The budget is also forward-looking. Both the IFO and the Department of Revenue, as I say, are looking at a reduction in revenues for the coming year, next fiscal year, which is why I want to have this opening balance to make sure we're accounting for that. I want to help schools. I want to help businesses. This is the sum total of everything. I want to help workers, and I want to do all this without raising one penny in taxes. In fact, I want to reduce corporate and income tax. I also think with an increase in recurring support for education at the state level, that's going to give local school boards all across the state the confidence they need to actually start thinking about reducing property taxes, which is going to be another thing that's going to help people all across the Commonwealth. So my plan is good for businesses, it's good for families, it's good for Pennsylvania. And because of the hard work we've done over the past 7 years, we have the resources we need to make these major investments and to keep Pennsylvania moving forward. So let's take advantage of this opportunity. That's the message of this budget. Let's put Pennsylvania on a path to prosperity for years and years to come. So thank you for having me here, and now I'll be happy to take questions.
All right, thank you so much, Governor Wolf. Really enjoyed the video and appreciate those remarks. Let's start some discussion now. I'm going to help moderate a little Q&A. We had our members submit some questions to us in advance. So I'll be helping to walk through a few of those, but we also have a couple of our members here with us. So that's actually how we're going to kick some things off right now. So our first question is going to come from Laura Corrett, the CEO of Giant Eagle and the chair of our board of directors at the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. So welcome, Laura. Please go ahead.
Hi, Laura.
Hi. Hi, Governor. How are you?
All right, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Matt. Governor, I'm honored to get the first question, and you've talked extensively about this, but given its importance, I want to go back to the corporate net income tax. It is the top priority for the Allegheny Conference and the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. And we so appreciate your willingness to engage with us on this issue, the inclusion of this reduction in your budget, and that you didn't tie it to mandatory unitary combined reporting. It's critical for us to be able to allow our region to attract business investment and talent by creating a more competitive business environment. As we have discussed many times, Ohio is aggressively marketing into Pennsylvania that they do not have a corporate net income tax at all, and they're able to use that as a marketing tool very effectively. Our organization stands ready to help you get this done. Can you talk a little bit more about your CNI rate reduction plan, the importance of the issue to you, and the chance of success in this budget cycle?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. That's a great question. This is really important to me, and I'm not just pandering here. If you look back, I was on the Business Tax Reform Commission. I think that was in 2003, and it was during the Rendell administration. And we unanimously, I mean, there were Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives on that, and unanimously proposed that we reduce the corporate income tax because it was just, there was real sticker shock that companies would look at that and say, we don't want to come to Pennsylvania. So that I supported that then. Then when I became governor, my first budget I supported. As you point out, Laura, I did think we ought to have mandatory combined reporting. And I think a lot of businesses were concerned that while it was great to have a reduction in the rate, moving to a different type of accounting might actually be a net negative for businesses. And that was not what I was intending, but that was the way. So anyway, then I came back with a second proposal to reduce the corporate net income tax using mandatory combined reporting, but basically saying this was meant to be revenue neutral. So if it turns out that the tax, actually the way it is with mandatory combined reporting produces more revenue than expected, all of that revenue would be used to do a further reduction in the corporate and net income tax. I mean, the idea was that the sentiment was right, but cash flow was not in phase. So it wasn't really a great deal. This year really is a reduction in the corporate and income tax. Where the state is looking at a reduction in revenues, we're estimating in hundreds of millions of dollars. And so this is a real tax reduction. And as you point out, no mandatory combined reporting. And it really is the beginning of getting us to where I think we need to be. I'm not sure that what Ohio's other taxes are to make that up, but they figure out how to do to make it up some other way. But the corporate net income tax is something that we need to address, and so I'm proud to start it at take it down to 7.9 or propose to do that, and then continue it. Suggest that continues through to 4.99, which is I think what we ought to be aiming for, somewhere around there. There are a lot of pass-throughs right now. They're paying at the 3.07 rate. A C corporation does have some advantages over pass-throughs, and I figured there ought to be some premium that's worth something. And so I figured 4.99%. Future general assemblies and future governors will decide whether that's the right target or not. But in any case, I think there's broad understanding and recognition that we do so well in all of our other taxes. We need to reduce this one.
Thank you, Governor.
Sure.
Thank you, Laura. Anything else to add?
No.
Okay.
I fully, and if just to make sure there's no confusion, I fully support the reduction in the corporate net income tax.
And we very much appreciate that.
Yes, yeah, just to underscore Laura's points there, Governor, we really appreciated that material sort of drop that you did down to 7.99 as opposed to just a half or 1%. We think that's very important. And in fact, like Laura said, we're calling this our P0 or priority zero issue for the year. So look forward to working with you to really get that down. So moving on, I'm actually going to take the next question here and ask you about some pending legislation related to our autonomous vehicle industry. For folks on the Zoom, and Governor, just to make sure you're aware, our chamber recently partnered with RIDC with support from the R.K. Mellon Foundation to examine the current state of the autonomous systems industry and robotics industry as a whole in southwestern Pennsylvania. And the report found that this industry brings in an estimated $1.5 billion in direct economic output, along with over $160 million in direct local, state, and federal tax revenues. Also, as I think you know, Governor, the Pittsburgh region's application is a finalist for the Federal Department of Commerce's Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And the focus is in this very sector. So you've been supportive, and we thank you for that. But getting back to the legislation, your administration, particularly through the leadership of Secretary Gromian, has worked closely with Senator Langerholk, as well as leadership in both the House and Senate, to advance legislation that would update regulations for the autonomous vehicle industry, which is so important to Pittsburgh's jobs and economy, but also to the whole state. So I was hoping you might be able to talk about this as a priority for you and your administration. And beyond just updating these regulations, what else could the state do, perhaps through investment or otherwise, to really help ensure that this industry continues to grow, not only in Southwestern Pennsylvania, but across the state? And how can we help support you with any efforts?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that the autonomous vehicle industry is something that is really important for Pittsburgh and for Pennsylvania. I think the state we probably compete most directly with is Arizona. And Arizona really doesn't provide, I think, the challenges, the hills, the different weather events that we have in a place like Pittsburgh. And I don't think Arizona, and I might be bragging here, but I don't think Arizona has the great institutions of higher education that are doing so much basic research and things like robotics that are important when you get to autonomous vehicles. So there's so many reasons why we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to encourage this industry. The legislation you're talking about, we also want to make sure, obviously, that we're being safe to pedestrians and everybody, and the industry wants to do that too. And I think that's where we're working right now. But as I understand it, we're all pretty much on the same page. We all want to do the same thing. And I'm looking forward to continuing to move forward. In terms of other investments, again, I think if you look at why, aside from the fact that Pittsburgh is a really great place to be, I mean, the basic ingredients of economic development are there. You have great universities, you have a great workforce. It's a great place to live. I mean, I love challenging folks from California who say that their weather is so great. I would stack our falls and our spring seasons up against the weather of any other state anywhere in the world. And so there are a lot of reasons why people would want to come here and help us do economic development, and robotics is one of those things. So part of the reason that we're succeeding here is because of investments that people have made, including the Commonwealth, in places like the universities, and places like our community colleges and basic education, and the work that organized labor has done with skills and skill workforce development. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to continue to do to make sure that we're as attractive as we can possibly be. The only thing that I think we still need to do some work on is in infrastructure. And I think the Fern Hollow Bridge collapse is just a reflection of how much all across Pennsylvania. I mean, we have over 3,000 bridges that we really need to work on. We have roads that we all know need to be better. So I think that would be something that could also help. These are investments that almost sound like, okay, they're not directly involved with autonomous vehicles, but they really are. They actually make life easier for all of us, and they certainly improve the opportunities that autonomous vehicle companies have in places like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that answer. For our next question, I would like to bring up Brandon Mendoza, the Executive Director of NAIOP Pittsburgh, which is the local chapter of the National Association that represents the interests of developers, owners of industrial, office, mixed use, related commercial real estate properties. So Brandon, there you are. Please feel free.
Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Governor, how's it going? Thank you for joining us today.
Sure.
One, I just want to say I'm intrigued with all of the questions so far, and I would echo Jen that the CNI rate reduction, we thank you for introducing that, and just let us know what we can do to help you get that over the finish line. Because that is a big sticker shock when we're trying to bring investment into the state. But on another note, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something I'm sure you hear a lot about, which is our permitting and regulation within the state. obviously we all expect some degree of permitting and regulations, obviously to protect our environment, to protect our citizens and whatnot. But, one thing that I hear constantly within our industry is some of the processes, particularly in certain regions of the state and within like the DEP districts, are very encumbersome, to investment and development. Wanted to get your ideas on just like what your administration is planning to do in this last year to try to, expedite some of that, and to, are there any negotiations between you and the legislative leaders to see if there is a potential fix?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brandon. I think I actually was on the other side of this. So I was in business till I got this job, and so I understand what you're saying. Sometimes the permitting calendar the timetable was just it took too long. And when I got here, we had some specific districts that were really taking just entirely too long. I mean, as you point out, healthy and responsible regulations make a difference for our environment, for everything else, but that they're not meant to be impediments to development. They're meant to be guidelines. So I think, in some districts it was taking hundreds of days to get a permit turned around. We're now down to an average of 60 days. I mean, I invested in additional people, and also we changed. Part of, I think, the problem was in process. We did a lot of process reform. So a lot of the stuff that was done with pencil and paper or pen and paper is now being done online and we've computerized a lot of the stuff. So that has speeded things up. In some cases, we can get things turned around in a day. The other thing you pointed out is that there have been some bottlenecks as a result of some shortage of employees. In this budget, I have $5 million just for DEP for additional employees to address this, because I think, I want, I recognize the need for responsible regulation, but again, these should not be barriers to responsible development. And to the extent that that takes place, and again, my own experience back when I was in business, it's not a matter of just, most businesses want to do things right. They just want to know what, get an answer. Here's what I've done. I've done everything according to the books. Let me get my permit. And that's as it should be. So that is really, I think, process improvement, which we've been doing, and money that this year alone, $5 million extra dollars to make sure that we have more people doing exactly that, getting permits turned around responsibly, but as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you, Governor. And if there's anything that we can do, especially as you guys start to negotiate in Harrisburg on your budget and the eventual budget, if there's anything that we can do to help on anything in regards to making sure that $5 million in extra support at the DEP gets through, and then also if there are any legislative reforms. I would say, we have seen states like Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, Ohio introduce some pretty good, changes in their process. And we would be willing at NAIOP to help collect, some analysis on those and share those with your team. As I said, these are red states and blue states, so it's really not like a partisan issue at all, just really about how you administer your program. But I just want to thank you, and definitely we at NAIOP will try to fight for that $5 million for extra support. We need as much staff as we can get to get these projects in and out of the process.
Oh, no, thanks for that support. And take a look at what we've done with process reform. Maybe there are some things that we could do to make it even better. We could learn some lessons. I back in school, you weren't supposed to plagiarize, but I think in public policy, it's okay, right? So if there's something that another state's doing that we can learn from, we're all ears here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. So for our next question, Governor, I'd like to turn to the topic of education, one that I know is a big priority of yours. Your budget proposal, I think, included about 1.5 billion of an increase in the basic education line item, but also substantial increases for other education initiatives from all the way to early childhood to higher ed. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit sort of about the end game of any proposed increased investment. So what are the particular projected outcomes that you'd hope to see from any increased investment?
So it's a great question. I mean, so much of the debate over education tends to be on the inputs, especially funding. And I think Pennsylvania has ample room to be criticized because I don't think we have been investing adequately. On average, I think you could make the argument, maybe we have, but there's so many school districts that have been left behind that the distribution of the funding has not been fair. So in 2016, Pennsylvania established the fair funding formula, basically a bipartisan commission chaired by 2 Republican legislators. And I think it's a good formula. And all the new money that has gone out since I've been governor has gone out according to that formula, but we're still, I think, behind. Now, the point about outcomes is, you can't just throw money at any problem and expect to get a good result. On the other hand, my argument on the input side is you can't keep taking money away or starving schools or anything of money and expect to get to a good place. So you need both. You need to be figure out what you want to see as a result of what you're doing, but you also want to make sure you're investing in it. We're not going to do this on the cheap. The outcomes, one of the first things I did when I got here was sit down with educators and say, okay, what is it we're trying to really do here? And I know there's a focus on test scores and that kind of stuff. And I have a little bit of an issue with that. I mean, I was a continuous improvement disciple when I was in business. Deming was the big guru. And he always said, you got to be careful about tying things to outcomes that can be manipulated. So in education, if we focus too much on test results, you're going to get what you want. You're going to get people teaching to the test. So I said, why don't we look at sort of outcomes beyond the classroom? Let's look at what happens to somebody 4 years out. Now you have all kinds of confidentiality issues and stuff like that, but we actually established some metrics in the Department of Education to look at when someone leaves the Pennsylvania school system. If, say, they go into a job, is the employer happy? Are they doing well? Or do they get fired 6 months after they got there? If they're going to college, do they need to take remedial courses? Or are they pretty much prepared to take college courses? I want to know those things. And those are the kinds of things I think we need to look at in terms of the outcomes. I think we need to invest. We're not going to get there on the cheap. And I think there are all kinds of good ways we can reform and improve our education system. But anything we do is going to cost money. And so we need to have these metrics. This is what we want. We want a relevant, high quality education system so that our the kids who go through this system have the opportunities we need them to have. By the way, another thing that I think is really important as we move into the future, we need to have a system of education that is open to everybody at every stage of life. We can't have just a once and done system that says, okay, you're now 22, 23, 24 years old. I was actually 29 when I finished my PhD. So graduate school, which some people say is the snooze button on the alarm clock of life. But at some point in your 20s, you've basically gone through the education system, and we don't make it real easy. Even apprenticeship programs are, they're okay in this regard. But for the most part, our post-secondary education system is not real friendly to people coming back in at, say, the age of 45. I've lost my job. I need to retool, retrain. But what am I going to do? So I think one of the other things we need to do is make sure that we have a high quality, relevant education system that's relevant not just to a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 29-year-old, but relevant to Pennsylvania at any stage in life. And so that's what I'd like to see as a result of this. But again, all of that requires that we start with some investments. So if you look at what I've done, investing heavily in basic education, special education, but also we've done some transformative work with our state system of higher education. In a really quiet fashion, we've taken those state universities and they are really moving in a very different direction, and a healthier direction, I think, than they were 7 years ago. So I think we need to change process. We need to change and improve the system we have. And we need to see these results of people who actually have better lives, more opportunity, and are doing much more for our economy than they're doing with the current system.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you for that. To keep us moving along, I would now like to welcome and bring up and introduce Alka Patel, Vice President of Government and External Affairs for Comcast's Keystone region. Alka, welcome.
Great, thank you, Jen. Good morning, Governor.
Hi, Alka.
Nice to see you. Couple quick thank yous before I launch in. First of all, really appreciate your comments on the education. The last question Jen asked you, as a former school board member, but also being in the corporate world, thinking about the workforce of the future, your points are spot on in terms of how do we allow for that continuous learning, and it's not just in those primary years. So thank you for your leadership there. And also want to say thank you for your leadership and your energy and passion, the sustained energy and passion over your terms in pushing forward these important policy efforts for sure. And then lastly, I will just say, I'm really excited to be here with you, even more so because I just recently returned to Pittsburgh to join Comcast after some time in DC. And so you can, I'm sure, imagine my question is going to be broadband related. So want to pose to you, I mean, there's a lot of activity here, but you know, if we think about all the federal funding that's out there from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we think about the federal COVID-19 pandemic relief laws that are out there, they've all provided some form of unique opportunity to quickly expand broadband services to areas in need, basically across the Commonwealth. And that was even more so highlighted during the pandemic. But what we've seen, you know, from our experiences, because we've been in this space for years and obviously doing our work on bridging the digital divide over the last 10 years and so forth, what we've seen from our experiences also coupled with, you know, unbiased research from independent third parties, such as the Pew Foundation, such as the National Digital Inclusion Coalition and others, is that except for rural areas, the issue really isn't about the internet or access to the internet. It's really about adoption. And so I know your administration has recently created the Broadband Development Authority, and they just had their first meeting last month, and that authority is meant to guide some of these efforts. So really curious to hear your thoughts on a little bit more about the authority's plans to deploy these funds. What will they be focusing on? And your thoughts around how will they work with providers to roll out some of these services, not only in terms of accessibility to the rural areas, but also really with a focus on adoption.
Yeah, now I'm getting old here, so if I forget something, but I think there are three different aspects to your question. One, the first is the you know, how are we going to do this from a technological point of view? And as you point out, a lot of where the technological need is in our rural areas. The FCC has done a census, which, and I spent a lot of time in Washington talking to a lot of people, lobbying myself for Pennsylvania to say, you know, we ought to be getting some support here. And I think that they think Pennsylvania is doing a pretty good job, and they applaud us for moving so quickly on that broadband authority, which, by the way, is bipartisan, was a piece of legislation that passed unanimously in the General Assembly. And a couple of the things that you pointed out, they're looking at. The first thing is technology. What is the right technology to get to some of these places that are hard to reach? And to a certain extent, the private sector has done a really good job. I mean, Comcast has a really pretty dense network all across the Commonwealth with hooking people up to the World Wide Web, and that's really important. But it is wrong for say, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to say to a Comcast, we want you to hook up all these people out the end of a road, and you're going to lose money on this deal, but you got to do it anyway because it's a good social cause. So what we need to do, and I think what the authority is going to do, is how can we make this economically viable? And that's where I think the support from the federal government is really going to be important. The country faced the same thing in the area of rural electrification, where the private sector did a really good job of getting electric lines out to places in the more densely populated areas. It was the harder to reach, the farther out, more sparsely populated areas where the economics just really weren't quite there. How do you address that delta? So that's the first thing. Second thing is in the technology, in those rural areas, what is the right way to reach? I mean, there are all kinds of different ways to do that. Elon Musk has an idea, and Comcast has an idea. So I think one of the things the authority has to do is try to figure out what is appropriate for each location from a technical point of view. And then finally, there's, as you point out, the digital divide. There are places that are densely populated, but you still have people who are without coverage, and that's either because they can't afford it or because they're not comfortable. Now I say this as I'll be 74 this year, so my children and soon grandchildren are going to know a heck of a lot more about these new technologies than I do. But that digital divide is real, and it keeps people from doing what we need them to do, and that is get on the World Wide Web. If you look at education without the World Wide Web, it's hard to conceive and getting harder to conceive each day. If you look at health with telemedicine and all the things we need to do, especially in all across the Commonwealth, dense and sparsely populated areas. If you look at even agriculture, we want people to produce food for us in remote areas, and we're saying, but you can't be tied to the World Wide Web. So, that's not going to work either. Economic development, what business is going to locate in an area where they can't control supply chain or communicate on a routine basis with their various employees and various divisions around the world or wherever, without having access to the internet, and even autonomous vehicles. We talked about that earlier. How does that work if we don't have a robust access to the World Wide Web? So there are a lot of things we have to figure out how to do. Part of that is in education. Part of it, I think, is in training, and part of it is in actually eliminating the financial hurdles that exist between people getting access to the internet and not having. All those things. That's what the authority has to figure out: the technology, the finances, and the education stuff. But Pennsylvania is committed to doing that, and I think with the authority, I went to the first meeting, actually kicked it off, and I think we recognize, I have recognized for a long time that this is really important, and with the support from the federal government, we have the ability to actually move forward very quickly, and I want to do that. Every day we delay, we're missing an opportunity to move forward economically. So I really think this is important.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate your comments, and I think you're definitely spot on. I mean, with all of the federal monies that are coming out and the state money, so forth, I think that helps bridge the gap between accessibility and affordability. And so then how do we ensure, to your last point, the education and the training necessary for the actual adoption and overcoming whatever barriers those might be, for sure. But we're happy to be a partner. We're happy to support in any way. You have our support in that regard, and really, again, appreciate your time and your leadership in terms of the authority and making sure that Pennsylvania advances to bridge that gap.
Thank you again, Alka. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alka. Governor, we had a few more questions, but we're getting close to time. But before I do ask you for any closing remarks, I'm going to take a second to just touch on one issue that you mentioned earlier, and that's around minimum wage. We absolutely appreciate your interest in raising the wage. But we do perhaps want to talk to you and your team about the tipped wage. And, and see if we might be able to have a discussion around that part of the policy. But we really do look forward to working with you on that issue. So I just wanted to get that in before we closed.
Duly noted. Okay,
thank you, sir. But now, please, if you have any last comments, I know we didn't get to everything we wanted to talk about. Any last thoughts on your final few months, I guess? Anything you really want to get over the finish line, or just anything we didn't get to touch on before I turn it over to my colleague to close us out?
No, and again, I just want to say thank you for having me here. I actually was chairman of my local chamber of commerce, was on the board of the state chamber of commerce, which sounds kind of you almost see there's this sort of divide between the business community and liberals like me, progressives. But I never saw that. Businesses have a vested interest in a healthy community. They want good schools. They want families that hold together and that feel like, this is the place they want to raise a family. They depend on individuals who are looking for good opportunity, because that's what it takes to get good, hardworking, ambitious employees. So if we figure this out together, I mean, obviously there are going to be places where we disagree, but there's so many places where we agree, and that's why I appreciate your support for the things that I've done. And we've had a number of conversations about things like the corporate income tax, which has an obvious appeal for any business, but you also have been really supportive of things in the education space, and I think we can all do a lot to make Pennsylvania better. Pittsburgh is in a really good place, not despite the business community, because of the business community has partnered going back to the 50s when Richard King Mellon and David Lawrence worked together to clean up the skies. And I think we need that same type of partnership to continue to move Pennsylvania forward. So I appreciate the chance to continue to work with you, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to speak here.
No, absolutely. We couldn't agree more. We've enjoyed working with you very much. So thank you so much, Governor, for being with us. Really appreciate your time. And at this point, I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, Patrice Thompson, Director of Investor Relations, to help close us out. Patrice.
Hello all, thank you Governor Wolf for the thoughtful discussion and for answering all of our questions. Thank you BNY Mellon for sponsoring the 2022 First Friday series. And before we close, we just ask that all participants complete the short anonymous survey that just popped up on the screen. And also just be on the lookout for next month. We will be in person, so details and logistics will be out to you all shortly. And stay healthy, have a great weekend, and thank you.